Hi, this is period four overview for APUS history. So now we're going to be getting into the era 1800 to 1848. So in your textbook, I'm just going to go on the online textbook here just to kind of show you where we are. So if you go to period four and you go to the introduction here, it says period four, 1800 1848, democracy, industrial revolution, industrialization and reform. So if you click on the introduction, this is in your textbook, obviously on page 254, but we're getting into time period of great, huge change and innovation. So we're talking for section 4-1, political and economic transformations. Remember, our country is coming in 1800s, fresh off the election of Thomas Jefferson over John Adams, the first ever transition of power between political parties. And the country itself has gotten through the turmoil of the 1790s and the French Revolution and the Federalists versus Democratic Republicans and French versus British and the Jay Treaty and Washington presidency. And now it's just a big question of where does America go from here? So we come into in 1800 as a country that's been through a lot, but still has a long ways to go. And by 1848, we are a power that stretches all the way to the Pacific Ocean. So what happens during that time period is what we're going to be discussing. So this on page 256 just gives you an overview of what we'll be talking about. But what I want to do now is take you over to a sheet that I'll be posting on your Google Classroom page here that just kind of gives you an overview of the time period. This is not something that you have to take and memorize. This is something that you can take and use as we go through the course just to give you your bearings. So 1800 is, again, the election of Democratic Republicans and the beginning of Jeffersonian democracy, which, again, I'm not expecting you guys to know right now what Jeffersonian democracy is, but we will be getting to that. Jefferson himself felt that he, or at least his administration, should be more of a man of the people type of administration, not hierarchical, meaning like you have like a very powerful central government and weaker individuals. That he wanted a place, a country where the average man felt that he was on common political ground with even the richest of men. So he would do things like make the White House open for people; they can just stop by if they want to. You obviously can't do that today. 1848. Country expands to the Pacific Ocean and the Seneca Falls Convention. So 1848 is the end of the Mexican War. America gained what is now California, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, Utah. So now we're a country that goes all the way to the Pacific Ocean. So we're a continental power. And the Seneca Falls Convention is where it's the first women's rights convention. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Mott are going to lay out a course for obtaining equal rights for women, which isn't going to happen for a very, very long time. Women don't even get the right to vote until 1920, but the stage is being set. 6 things to know about the time period. The United States continued to develop its own democratic ideals, sparking debates about the role of the federal government and leading to the formation of various political parties. So you had the Democratic Republicans and the Federalists. Eventually, the Federalists are going to fall by the wayside. There's going to be a Whig party. Democratic Republicans are going to transform into the Democrats. So the party systems are changing. The role of the federal government, as the country gets bigger, as it becomes more powerful, as its economy grows and prospers, the question is, well, how big should the federal government get, and at what expense should it take power from the states? 2, the U.S. Supreme Court established the principle that federal laws take precedence over state laws. They call this the Supremacy Clause. A federal law trumps a state law. And the Supreme Court began to flex its muscles during this time period with the decision Marbury versus Madison, which gives the Supreme Court the power of judicial review, which allows them to review any law passed by Congress and declare it constitutional or unconstitutional. 3, America developed a national culture, especially after the War of 1812, and various religious and social reform groups emerged. Very interesting time period here, 1830s, 1840s especially. You have groups like the Mormons that are formed. You have, it's a Christian group that views its religion very differently from traditional Christian groups. You have reform movements like the temperance movement, a movement to ban alcohol. You have the abolitionists forming a movement to end slavery. You have women's rights groups emerging. So all kinds of different people looking at what their role in society is and demanding a greater role. Number 4, America underwent an economic and technological revolution. So we go from being a very agrarian society to an industrial culture by 1848. Again, most Americans in 1848 are still farmers. It's still more rural than city, but it's changing rapidly. You have steam power. You have the factory systems. You have railroads that are developing. You have the telegraph. There's a lot of mass communication. I'm sorry, mass transportation. There's a lot more movement of ideas and people. Westward expansion is happening. So number 5, expanding westward after the Louisiana Purchase. The U.S. sought to expand its borders and to be seen as a major player in foreign trade. By 1848, we have everything from Washington south. The northern border has been established. We get California, New Mexico. Texas is ours. We are the shape that we will be even today as far as the lower 48 states go. And we fight wars to get there. We have a lot of disputes along the way, but it's a very interesting transformation. Number 6, as new states join the U.S., the debate over slavery rages. Where should slavery expand to? So if you remember from 8th grade, we got the Missouri Compromise. Eventually, in the next unit, we're going to do the Compromise of 1850, but we're kind of kicking the can down the road as a country. The Constitutional Convention proved that slavery was always going to be an issue between North and South. And the more the U.S. expands westward, the question is, well, are these new states going to be free states, or are these new states going to be slave states? And that's going to be a huge issue, huge wedge issue that divides Americans north and south. There are 3 revolutions during this time here. They're political, economic, and social. Political being, you got democracy taking on new forms. You have Jeffersonian democracy, you have Jacksonian democracy, federal versus state power. Again, don't worry about memorizing those things right now. We will be getting to those throughout the unit, but just things to be thinking about. We know who Thomas Jefferson was. We know who Andrew Jackson was. We know that they are remembered as being powerful presidents for a reason. They left a legacy. Jackson specifically, reaching out to the common man, like all white men are able to vote by the time Andrew Jackson is president. So suffrage rights have changed, and the more people that can vote, the more their individual concerns and beliefs are forced to be heard at the national level, because if you can vote, you have a voice in politics. You have a voice in power. Territorial expansion, you got the Louisiana Purchase, the Mexican War, which gained us the American Southwest, and the Oregon Country, which gained us what is now Oregon and Washington from the British, almost went to war with Great Britain over this territory. Universal white male suffrage, again, by the end of this period, all white men can vote. The two-party system is enshrined in our system. By the end of the 1848, you have Whigs versus Democrats, whereas we start off with Federalists versus Democratic Republicans in 1800. You have North versus South, the expansion of slavery, tariffs, which are taxes on imports. The Northerners liked that because it protected Northern industry. The Southerners hated it because the South is a slave culture that relies on cash crops. They import most of what they use and eat. They don't manufacture themselves, so tariffs hurt them. And then trade in general. We're a country that's flourishing economically. We need to be able to trade with the world. Economic, we have something called the market revolution. Industrialism, there's factory life in the north, like the Lowell factory system. Women are going to work in greater numbers than ever before. Cash crops in the south. Cotton becomes king during this time period. It is America's #1 export. It's our greatest source of revenue as a country. Innovations like steam power, the cotton gin, interchangeable parts. We are at the forefront of technological change during this time period. Transportation, communication. So you've heard of the Erie Canal. 1825, the Erie Canal was finished in New York. Even through Hermitage, what is now Hermitage, Sharpsville. If you go down to Falmouth Sportsnook and look across the street, there's the little area where people go fishing. And if you walk, there's 2 old locks that tower over the walkway. Those were finished in 1836. That was part of the Erie Extension Canal, because again, waterways are the transportation or the highways of early America. So we start off with canals. We're building roads to get horse and buggy and these ox carts from point A to point B. But by the end of this time period, we have steamships. We have railroads that are transporting people long distances. Our population, we're still more of a rural culture, but our urban areas are growing. Immigration is increasing at a rate that America has never seen before since the 1840s, with the Irish and the Germans coming in here in large numbers. They're moving to cities. They're bringing their culture and their customs with them. Socially, the last thing, the role of women and Republican motherhood. So Republican motherhood, if you remember from period 3, the whole idea that women should be educated, but they should be educated so that they too can raise good, moral and decent and intelligent children, so that they can go out in the world and conquer things, the men, that is. So women are starting to question their roles in society. They're getting involved politically with the temperance movement, which is the movement to ban alcohol. But in 1848, there are women that say, well, that's not good enough. We want to actually get involved. We want to be able to have the right to vote. We want to be able to have the right to have our voices heard. So you have the first Women's Rights Convention at Seneca Falls in 1848. Then you got the expansion of slavery. You have the abolition movement in the North. You have people in the South, the fire eaters who are really gung ho. Let's keep slavery. And you have this moral crusade by some that says that slavery is a moral evil. Some people in the South would counter that it's biblical. It's that this is moral and right, and that we're educating our slaves and we're giving them a better life than they would ever have anywhere else. There's a lot going on here in period 4, but it's a very interesting time period. Hopefully you will find it interesting too. Do you have to memorize everything I said? Absolutely not. We will be getting to all of this throughout period 4. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you on Friday.